Good morning and welcome to Lattes and Leaders with Dr. Brad Johnson, best-selling author and accomplished public speaker specializing in education and educational leadership. I am your co-host, Jeremy Johnson, organizational psychology consultant specializing in career coaching, training, and development. Meet us here each week to discuss topics in education and leadership and meet with some of the top education talent and thought partners from across the globe. So grab your latte, sit back, and enjoy a relaxed conversation that will leave you informed and encouraged. Good morning and welcome to Lattes and Leaders with Dr. Brad Johnson. This morning we have with us a very special guest. We have with us Dr. Dana Bashara.
Hi, Dana. So glad to have you on today.
Brad, it's an honor to be invited to visit with you. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
So we're just really excited to have you with us this morning. We do want to get started with a little bit of your background. Tell us about your journey so far.
Sure. So I grew up the child of two educators. My mother was a elementary school teacher. I grew up in Pennsylvania, and my father was a football coach. And so I feel like education has been in my blood for a long time. I graduated and I moved to San Antonio, Texas, and was hired as a first year teacher here in this district in Alamo Heights Independent School District. And so my entire career has been spent in this one district. So I've served as a teacher, I've served as an assistant principal, as principal, I've served as a director of communications, director of human resources, and then I spent 8 years as assistant superintendent prior to being named superintendent here 6 years ago. So I'm going into my 7th year as serving as superintendent here.
Wow, that's amazing, and that's a good lifespan too for superintendents. As you know, the turnover rate is so high, especially in our country. Most of them last about 2 to 3 years. So you must be doing something great down there.
I appreciate you saying that. For me, I'm married to an alumni who graduated from this district. I have 4 children of my own who have gone through this district. And so when I talk about my work, I'm able to talk about it as being both professional, but also very personal.
Personal.
So we were talking a little bit before we started rolling here and talking about your background in psychology. Can you tell us a little bit about maybe how that has informed your leadership?
Sure. So it's interesting. My psychology background actually, I had a concentration in neuroscience. And so I really feel like so much of the theories and practices behind brain-based research, instructional strategies, has come from, that school of thought. And so I do feel like I have a little bit of background in the understanding of that at a pretty deep level.
Good. Yeah. Yeah. It is important. There's just so much research that we can utilize, especially in education. And it's so important that, we stay informed and stay up to date. So that's really great.
Well, and I think too. Well, I was just going to say with the brain based and neurosciences. Unfortunately, I think we get away from some of that when we forget to let children be children and learn how they learn as children with recess. That's a big talking point for me is just the importance of recess and letting them play and develop, those the brain body connection that they do with free play and recess and physical activity.
Well, you bring up a great point, Brad, just the importance of the acknowledgement of appropriate developmental practice too, correct? And just that, we talk about standards and accountability and what we face in the classrooms as a result of that. And it's almost like we step away from that zone of proximal development, that acknowledges the importance of developmental stages in play, and the way that learning becomes meaningful, inside the brain. So you bring up a great point.
So Dr. Johnson and I, in our last couple of books, we've talked a lot about personality theory and applying that to education and to leadership roles within education. So which of your qualities do you think have made the greatest impact on your success as a leader?
Sure. So One of the practices that we're big on here in the district is about strengths-based leadership. And there's a
Mhm.
premise behind that in understanding that followers look towards leaders for four things: for trust, for compassion, for stability, and for hope. And so those aren't qualities, but when you think of your followers looking to you for that, then it helps me kind of parse out what the most important quality might be. And to me, it's that relationship building quality.
Mhm.
Strong leaders really need to prioritize strong relationships with those with whom they lead, listening, rapport building. And when I talk about this, I talk about it as being an effort around intentional leadership. And so there are
Mhm.
three different components when I talk about intentionality and leadership, and it's one of them is randomness. And randomness is providing for and supporting your followers in unexpected ways. So showing up, to my principal's office with a cup of coffee, on their birthday, making sure that at some point I have made some connection with them, doing things that they don't necessarily expect me as a leader to do.
Oh,
The second part of intentionality is what's called studiousness. And that means really studying those with whom you lead. And so, knowing each one of my principals, knowing each one of my directors, knowing their family members, knowing their children, knowing if they're walking through some kind of life challenge, just really, being studious about building those relationships. And then the last part of this intentional leadership piece is thoughtfulness. And so, after you study those with whom you're leading, you follow through with actions that are thoughtful. And so that means, writing personal notes to those who are following you as they're going through a season of challenge, showing up. I remember when COVID was first a thing here, showing up. One of my principals got COVID for the first time, one of my first leaders, and showing up on the doorstep with chicken soup and just putting it out there and making sure that they knew, like, I know you're afraid of this. I'm afraid of this for you, but I'm there. And so just thoughtfulness is so
Mhm.
important. So when I talk about intentionality, I talk about it being rooted in love. And I talk about the importance of, sharing your heart and sharing your love with those whom you lead.
oh, that's so good. And, I agree 100%. I love each one of those points that you follow. That sounds like a really good book that you need to
You write it,
write.
Brad. I'll read
Uh,
it.
it sounds like you've got it down pat, but that is, I love the randomness. I don't think I've ever heard someone say that before. But it's like when I talk to principals, I'm like, show up at their door with a coffee,
Yep.
or
Yep.
water, or whatever. Just you never know. But it shows that you called it thoughtfulness or mindfulness that
Yep.
we have towards those that we serve. And the other thing was that you know them, because my thing is always, how can you lead people if you don't know them?
Correct.
And the better you know them, the easier it is. And the thing
Correct.
too, you build that trust with them. We call that trust capital that you build with them, so that even if you have to have a tough conversation with them or
Yep.
make a tough decision, they trust you enough, that key word you said earlier too, to do that because you've built that with them. That's awesome.
Brad, I'm going to tell you one thing I did that just kind of took me by surprise in the response to it. At the beginning of last school year, I went into 300 and some classrooms and I wrote just a quick sentence on the board to each teacher. And I don't know all those teachers yet, but I signed my name to it. And I'm not kidding you. Over half of those teachers kept those messages on their board all year long, wrote "do not erase." And as I was making rounds at the end of the year, showed me that it was still up there. And so those random acts, just, I mean, they're high leverage, surprising people with your heart and with showing up and being present, letting them know that they're seen, makes all the difference.
Oh, that's so powerful. I love that. I'll probably share that at some point too. But it's so true. We talk about that teachers are typically high in agreeableness, so they are very affirmational towards their students, but good leaders know to be affirmational towards them. And so, yeah, just that quick note, somebody like, oh, that doesn't mean much, but to some of them, man, that meant more than
Sure.
anything that you could do. Yeah, so Wow, what a way to raise morale.
So, can you tell us about some of the challenges that you faced in leadership?
Certainly, I would share that I feel like my superintendency the past 6 years have been characterized by some pretty significant times of challenge. Obviously, the pandemic provided, an unforeseen and unexplained, just an overwhelming challenge for me, for my community, for my leadership team. And then, what we walked through after the pandemic and just the crazy political context around public schools and educators and the backlash that we were seeing after being on such a high, being such heroes and walking our community through the time of challenge. And so, I just point to those two as being kind of some defining, moments of challenge. Obviously, in leadership roles, personnel is always,
Mhm.
a challenge, and you do what the best you can to hire quality personnel to be part of your team, to be in the classrooms. And I was telling my board, people are not perfect. And because of that, there are unforeseen challenges that we experience, things that we never anticipate just with the people in our organizations and supporting our organizations through those times. But, as I think about the pandemic, as I think about that crazy years of political unrest and frustration around education, for me, it's come down to just the willingness to be collaborative and transparent and to understand that I can't get through that challenge, those times of challenge by myself, with my qualities, with my skills. I really need to rely on those around me. And so my team is just incredible. A real focus of mine has always been leadership development, leadership capacity. And so during that time of the pandemic, it was all hands on deck, and it was bringing as many of our staff members into the fold as we could to help us make the decisions and help be a part of, the process that we were walking through. And I'd say the same thing during some of those years where we were, getting criticized about library books and getting criticized about, providing character education in the classroom. And so a lot of that came from senior citizens in our community who are at home, watching some news and watching some misinformation being disseminated. And as a result of that, I started a program, and we're the mules here in Alma Heights. We are the mules. Okay. And so I started a program that's called Grand Mules and Senior Mules, and invited them to come into our schools and to sit with me and to hear about the vision behind our profile of a learner, to listen to a student panel of our seniors, talking to them about their experiences in our schools. And then we would walk the campus. We would go into the classrooms so that they could see firsthand all that is good and right about public education and what we were doing here in Alma Heights ISD. And so again, in times of challenge and controversy, to me, what has served me well is trying to be collaborative and inclusive and transparent about those issues.
And I like that you brought them in to see. I think that's so important. One of the things I share is that, a school and even at a district level, you have to share your story. And people will add to that, yeah, if you don't share your story, others will. But I go a step further, because the others that will, typically it's negative.
That's right.
The people that speak up the most, people that are okay and fine with things very rarely speak up, but the ones that are going to are the ones that, it's not going to be a good thing. So, and I couldn't help but laugh when you talked about being the mules. I remember, I think it was last year, the year before, I was speaking at a school district in Texas. And instead of being at the school, the superintendent moved it to some offsite. It was like a restaurant or something, or a place, a community where they had events. And in the middle, while I was speaking, there was a field outside that was fenced in that had mules in it. And so, of course, they start making neighing or whatever that they do. And it was just so funny, and everybody laughed. It was just, I said, see, they're even agreeing with me.
I have a funny story. I have a superintendent, a female superintendent friend, and she is in a district where her mascot is a hippo, and she calls herself the head hippo. And I said, I just want to go on record letting y'all know that I'm never going to call myself the head mule.
I love it. That's good.
As I was doing research, I came across the Alamo Heights Independent School District. The Twitter is the only one that I looked at out of all the platforms. But I just really appreciate the transparency there. When, there's a new staff member, it's shared, with their picture and a little bit about them. And I just think it's really important. And, that goes with the community building. And as we've been conducting interviews over the past few days, that's one of the recurring themes of, successful leaders in schools is the integration with the community. And that's huge. And I just wanted to, give you some props for that. It's just so important to have that transparency, and that, sharing your personnel is sharing the story of the school because they make the school. So that's really cool. Definitely appreciated that.
It is part of telling your story, right? Getting out there and putting as much positive out as you can. There's a risk to that with social media right now. It's a risk taking strategy, just because you get some feedback sometimes that you always not necessarily want to get either. But that's part of it. That's part of it. I have an incredible communications director, and she encouraged me this year to start. Our community seems to live in Instagram. And so she said, Dana, I really want you to start a superintendent page, or I don't know if you call it a page. Anyway, a site. I don't know what you call it. I'm not good with the lingo, but and I thought, oh my goodness, I don't want to manage a superintendent Instagram site. That's just one more thing. And she said, no, people are going to appreciate getting to see a little behind the scenes look from the perspective of a superintendent. And I can't tell you how well that has served me this year. Folks, appreciate seeing what I see when I'm out on campuses. I sent out yesterday just snapshots of a curriculum instruction meeting I was in around our teacher incentive allotment assessments, and the people that showed up, our staff members that showed up in the summer to do that. And it really has served me well in trying to share, my perspective as a superintendent and the story and what I see through my eyes.
Yeah, and that's a great point too. Because I use pretty much every media stream I can. And let me tell you, I get a lot of feedback sometimes.
Right.
I see why people don't post a lot, because it's, anything you say usually is taken wrong by someone. But the other thing I found, like you were talking about with Instagram, is it seems I have different people that follow me. Especially the age groups are different from Facebook to Instagram to Twitter.
Yes.
And so it is this a whole nother population that you're reaching now that you may not have even realized. So that's a great thing and a great way to keep sharing your story.
The funniest is when I go to the high school and I have high school kids that say, will you take a selfie with me and post it? Like they want posted on my Instagram. You have arrived when high school students.
That's right. That's right. You've arrived.
So can you take a minute and tell us about a couple of teachers that have had the biggest impact on your development? It can be teachers from your own personal education or those that you've worked with. Maybe an administrator that you worked under at some point.
Sure. So, I immediately go to myself as a learner and as a student. And I think of a teacher I had, an English teacher that I had in high school, who I really feel like helped me redefine my own image of myself. Her name is Miss Willig, and she was my AP English teacher. And it was junior year, and she called me after class and said, Dana, you need to run for class president. And I was a pretty introverted, student. I had a lot of friends, but I never saw myself as in that role, having those kind of skills. And she said, no, I do. And there are others that think that of you too. And I remember going home and talking to my mom about it and thinking, I don't know about this. And my mom said, there's something to that. When others see something in you, you need to be open to that and you need to accept that. And, I went on to be class president and student council president, went to college, was my student government president, sorority. Like it redefined the possibilities of who I could be, just some simple words from a teacher. And I talk about that with my staff. Like, you never know the impact and the influence your words and your actions are going to have on the trajectory, of your students. I think about my doctoral work. I had a professor in my statistics class, before I did my dissertation, and he was incredible in that, he'd said, I'm going to teach you this. And then if you don't get it, I have another way to teach it to you. But if you still don't get it, I have a TA and they've got different strategies. And if that doesn't work, then I'm going to have, like, it was not a possibility that you were not going to learn this material that was so overwhelming, at the time. And so I remember taking that little nugget with me. And then, as a mom of four, I'm going to tell you, there is nothing more impactful than seeing the way that teachers interact with your own children. And, hearing stories at the dinner table, hearing the way that my children are defining themselves through the words and the actions of the teachers that they interact with. And so, there's, for me, my work, is rooted in my belief about the importance of educators. I truthfully do not believe that there's any more important role than that of a teacher. And that's what I've dedicated, my work towards is supporting those in the classroom and supporting, those who support teachers and lead teachers. And so I feel like I'm kind of getting off on a tangent here, but yeah, I can't, there's so many stories I could tell you about impactful teachers. And it's a privilege every day to see it, right? Like, I get to see that every single day.
Oh, good. Yeah. Yeah, that's a great mindset. We talk a lot about the importance of self-care in education. People tend to, kind of give until they give out sometimes. So how do you take care of yourself? What's your thing?
So I have learned to take care of myself. I feel like, I was a very young principal. I was principal when I was 26 years old. And, I'm an achiever and I want to make people proud. And in doing that, it gets dangerous at times, the amount of effort and energy and time that you put in to this work. So I do feel like it might have been COVID and the pandemic that really kind of helped put things in perspective for me, and understanding the importance of quality family time. To me, that's what fills, my bucket. Time with my kids, playing games, watching movies, protected time at dinner with them, and there's many times during the week where we have dinner, but then I'm back out, on campuses, at community events at night. One or two of them will come with me, but just protecting that time. And the way that I've learned to do that is by being disciplined with my calendaring. And so my secretary really works with me to support what my calendar looks like as far as work that I have to get done. That's on the calendar, work time. And it is okay to close your door and get your work done, as long as you balance that with being available and being open door and being out and about, with the people that you lead. So on Tuesdays, those are my coaching days. And so I don't even come into the office on Tuesdays. I'm on all of my campuses. I meet with all of my principals.
I love
We
it.
meet first in their office and then we walk the campus, and, we're available. So folks know that if they need me, they're going to see me on Tuesday. If it can't wait, they can call me, but there's a regular time with Dana always on Tuesdays. And so again, just that balance for me has come down to being disciplined about calendaring.
That's so awesome. And I love that you're out on the campus, because a lot of times, again, I'll share something about superintendents and they'll be like, I don't even know who ours is, they never see them. But I'm like, yeah, when you're there in the school, even if they just see you there, that's just, that's shouting so much about that you're there, you're present, you're in the moment, and that, you really do care. So, teachers appreciate that, your administrators appreciate that. And it takes a little work. It's not easy, you know. I mean, you have to set aside that time, like you said, and have to put other things aside to do that. But I just think it's so impactful and makes such a huge impact on your school and on the district as well. So I appreciate, and I'm sure all your staffs appreciate that you do that too.
So I'm going to open the floor, kind of whatever you want to talk about. Do you have any just nuggets of wisdom for leaders? Any words of advice?
I think, again, over the years and serving in so many different leadership roles, my nugget of wisdom tends to always be around the willingness to be vulnerable. I feel like as a young leader, you know, I felt like folks looked to me to have all the answers, to set the direction, to take care of all of the problems. And as I've progressed in leadership over the years, I've really come to understand that I don't. And vulnerability takes courage, you know, to put yourself out there and to say, you know, I need my team. I look to my team. I've shared this. I've built an incredibly talented team around me that gets into the think tanks with me, gets into the problem solving. I look to my trustees. You know, they have incredible community perspective that I need to listen to. I need to take their advice. I need to hear what they're saying. I need to not be the superintendent who has it all figured out. You know, I need to be the superintendent who's vulnerable enough to say, you know, I've got leadership talents. I've got leadership talents and strengths, but I'm better and I'm going to be a better leader if I'm, you know, willing to look to others to help with that. So.
Yeah, that's a great viewpoint, because a lot of times they do. I think there's such pressure on superintendents that they almost feel like they can't give any of that responsibility away, because at the end of the day, it rests on you regardless. So I think it not just vulnerability, but I think it takes a lot of confidence in yourself to be able to do that. But on the flip side of that, it makes sense that when you're getting the best from everyone that you're developing, you know, you're going to be able to make the best decision. So it really, you know, reflects on actually being a very smart, effective leader to do that. But I think that transition to that is hard for some, because they, you know, basically they're like, well, the buck stops with me. So, you know, I have to do everything. But I think that's how you quickly burn out too, you know. So I think that's a healthy perspective that you have on leadership. So, and we have one last question. This is the hardest one. So since this is called Lattes and Leaders, although you're in Texas and it's 150 degrees all the time, what is your beverage of choice? Is it coffee, lattes, cappuccino, espresso, or none of the above?
Yeah, I am a straight coffee girl with a little half and half and a little Splenda. That's it.
I love it. We were talking to someone the other day, and he was like, I have to have it full of sugar and creamer, like more than the coffee. And I said in the South, we call that coffee pie.
Nice. That's right.
So he found a new word that he was going to use. But so you you're the poster teacher that needs that coffee to get going in the morning, I guess.
That's
so
right.
I think we
That's
all feel that way. So, man, it was a pleasure to have you, to finally talk to you. I know we've interacted for a long time on social media, and I appreciate your wonderful endorsement of the latest book.
Absolutely. I sent it to my principal, that copy. That was a wonderful book.
Oh, well, I appreciate it. But it sounds like you may have a book or two inside of you with your experiences and your philosophy. So I'll probably hold your feet to the fire for that one to get you to do that. So, but yeah, I appreciate you being on so much.
Brad, nice to meet you. Again, I appreciate your inspiration that you provide to all of us. So thanks for having me today.
This has been Lattes and Leaders with Dr. Brad Johnson. We hope that you leave today feeling informed and inspired. For more educational content, be sure to add this podcast to your list and follow Dr. Johnson on any and all social media platforms. For more information on Dr. Johnson, Jeremy Johnson, and special guest, Check out drbradjohnson.com. That is DOCTOR, bradjohnson.com. Hope to have you back soon.